Have you ever dreamt of a better version of yourself?
What is up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. It is the end of 2024. The end of the year is here, and it's that time of year when you think back on all of the amazing movies that you watched. I recently put together a top 10 list of my favorite films from the year. It's a fun video, and I had a lot of fun making it. Definitely check it out, but the thing that stuck out to me was the amount of horror that was on there. And so, in addition to my top 10 list, I wanted to make a top 10 list of my favorite horror films of the year. This will also serve as a recommendation list, so if you haven't seen any of these, this is kind of just my way of saying you should definitely watch it. As always, be sure to leave me all of your thoughts down in the comments. I always appreciate hearing from you guys. Also, give me your top 10 list. What are your favorite 10 horror films from 2024? But without further ado, let's just get this thing going. I'm going to start with number 10, and number 10 is Late Night with the Devil. This is directed by Cameron and Colin Cairns, starring David Dastmalchian. And honestly, with a title like this, like Late Night with the Devil, my first thought was like, what am I really getting myself into here? But then after watching it, you realize you know exactly what you were getting yourself into because they follow that title to a T. Late Night with the Devil. This is a late night broadcast from the 70s that goes horribly wrong because it's like a Halloween special and they have this possessed girl on air, and it's just the scariest, craziest thing you've ever seen. But the thing that impressed me the most, I guess, were the lengths that they went to make this feel like it was an actual broadcast. This broadcast that was unearthed and people maybe had forgotten about, or something that kind of changed the trajectory of late night television back in the 70s and really scared the shit out of people sitting in their living rooms watching this. And it also was really cool because they referenced Johnny Carson and the costumes and the sets. Everything felt like you were in the 70s and you were in this thing, and it was a real thing. David Dastmalchian is amazing in it. I had seen him in so many different supporting roles, and honestly, he typically just plays like the creep. This was my first time ever seeing him as a leading man, and he absolutely held it down. But yeah, this movie is scary as all hell, but beyond that, it just makes you uncomfortable. And I think that's what it was going for. It was an awesome one to see in theaters, but I think this plays really well. I think it's on Shudder now. I think it would play really well in your living room. So definitely check this one out if you haven't. But moving on to number 9. Number 9 is a film that had a ton of hype, and I knew I was going to be seeing this at Fantastic Fest. That's a festival down here in Austin. I knew this was going to be playing, and so I was very excited to see it early, see it before the general audiences. This is Terrifier 3. And I said this in my review, I said this in my out of theater reaction, like truthfully, I wasn't the biggest fan of Terrifier 1 and Terrifier 2. I appreciated it for what it was. I watched the movies. I made myself watch those movies, and I really, really liked Art the Clown. It just felt like the first one maybe pushed it a little bit too far for me in the gore section, and then the second one took it in this like fantastical direction that it confused me a bit. But what the third one does is it merges all of that. Whether it ramps up the violence or not, I enjoyed it because there was just so much going on with the characters and with the story, especially with the theme of Christmas, that it all made sense and it all fit together and nothing was overwhelming. Also, Art the Clown for me in Terrifier 3 became a star. He was hilarious in this film. His obsession with Santa Claus is just like when he sees Santa Claus, he's like, oh my god, even though he doesn't talk, but he's like, oh, you know. There's just something so oddly charming about him as a character, but then all of a sudden he's ripping somebody apart with a chainsaw and you're just like, oh my god, okay, well, I guess that's not a good clown though. But the continuation of Sienna's story was very clever, and I think moving forward we can definitely expect a Terrifier 4 and 5 possibly. And watching this kind of little engine that could, Damien Leone's like precious Terrifier franchise, watching it skyrocket and just take off in a very similar way to like Everything Everywhere, where it's just a phenomenon and it makes so much money. This small little independent film, it was a beautiful thing to see. It was a beautiful thing to see the hype around it, but also just to see audiences enjoying it and liking it. You know, this wasn't just something that people talked about and they're like, hey, go see this because it's super gory. It's a good movie. It's a really good time, and it warrants another one to come after it. And I think the hype's just going to keep growing, and Art the Clown is going to keep cementing himself as a very, very prominent character in Halloween. So Terrifier 3 rules. I can't wait for the next one. Moving on to number 8. My number 8 is a very strange film, but a film that impressed the hell out of me. It's from Neon. It's directed by Tillman Singer, and it's starring Hunter Schafer. This is a movie called Cuckoo. And like Dan Stevens, if you know the actor Dan Stevens from Cuckoo, he was in Abigail this year. I mean, he had a hell of a year, but there's just something something about his performance in this that is just so damn good, but also Hunter Schafer. Like, I'm a huge Euphoria fan, and seeing her hold this movie down, main character, she drives the plot forward, and she does such an excellent job. And the way that they utilize music throughout this, you know, she plays the bass in this band, and the bass line is kind of going throughout it. And then just this premise, like a cuckoo bird. What the hell am I getting myself into? What does this whole thing have to do with a cuckoo bird? And the way that they do that, and like the monster thing that is in this film, the way that that thing looks, as well as the way that they use sound to kind of add to these crazy action set pieces, it's really cool. It's a really cool visual story, and I had a lot of fun with it. I've already seen it twice, and I definitely plan on watching it again. It's just a good old-fashioned horror film, and Neon sort of just had a banger year with a lot of different films. This is a company that I think the horror genre has to watch out for. Like, A24 gets a lot of props, as well they should, but Neon, good year for Neon, and I'm going to be talking about some more of their films here in a little bit. But moving on to number 7. Number 7 is honestly one of my most anticipated of the entire year. This is Alien Romulus, and I'm a big fan of the Alien franchise. This is something that sort of popped up on my radar like end of 2023, and so all of a sudden I was super hyped for this, knowing that this wasn't going to be Ridley Scott, and knowing that this was Fede Alvarez, who's a big fan of the Alien franchise, and you kind of just get this feeling like seeing what he had done prior, you get the feeling that if he's a big fan, he's going to be putting his heart and soul into this thing. And then you saw the first trailer and everything looked great. The face huggers looked great. The xenomorph looked great. And so you're like, okay, cool. Let's see what this has to offer. Then you bring in Kaylee Spaney. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but you know, she had a good year as well. She was in Civil War, and then she was in this. She was the main character. But then all of these other young performances in this film, they brought Alien back in a way that I think audiences have been craving, similar with how Prey did for the Predator franchise. It's just like, at the end of the day, you just want to see some people on a ship, you want to see some crazy deaths, you want to see some face huggers, you want to see all of the things that we love so much about the franchise told through a good story. Whatever you think about Prometheus and Alien Covenant aside, like, I enjoy those movies, but it's because I love the Alien franchise and I enjoy what it's doing for sort of the lore and building out this world. But a lot of people might not like that. A lot of people might not want that. They just want to go watch a movie again with face huggers attacking people and freaking aliens bursting out of people's chests. You know what I mean? And that's exactly what this film was. It was a great time. I don't know if I can confidently say that it exceeded my expectations, but it met my expectations, and that's definitely enough to put it on this list because I was hyped. But moving on to number 6, and this is one that I feel like maybe missed a lot of people. This is Zoe Kravitz's directorial debut. This is a film called Blink Twice. And damn it, I don't know if this is streaming on anything. It looks like it's streaming on maybe MGM Plus. Who has MGM Plus? What the hell even is that? Sling TV. It's on Sling TV. I'm sure you can rent it on Prime Video, but this is a movie that is so, it's a classic thriller and suspense film. Like, I didn't know what to think with this Channing Tatum, Naomi Ackie led film, and it is so surprising. It is so much fun. It very much has kind of a Guess Who vibe, even though that's not really like the premise. It just keeps you guessing the whole time. You're trying to figure out what's going on with the main character, and I love movies like that. You're placed in an atmosphere where everybody's acting normal, but things don't quite feel normal. And Naomi Ackie gives this phenomenal performance, and with her character Frida, I think was her name, you gotta go on this journey, you gotta go on this ride. And in my review I said this, but I still mean this. This is Channing Tatum's best performance of his career. There's a moment near the end where he gives this monologue that is just powerful and fantastic. It's some of the best acting that I saw this entire year. I love Channing Tatum in this movie, and it's definitely worth the watch. So check out Blink Twice. But moving on to number 5. And dang it, is every movie just going to be like my most anticipated? This one was also like, I was very, very much anticipating this. This is Smile 2 from Parker Finn, the follow-up to the original Smile, which came out a couple years back. And that movie hit me hard. My wife and I love the first Smile. And so seeing that, you know, you kind of get the feeling towards the end, it sets itself up for a sequel so well. And so going into this and seeing the trailers, seeing that this is going to center around a pop star, you're like, damn it, that is such a good idea. And honestly, like, when you zoom out, I think whatever you thought about the film in general, there's no denying that Naomi Scott just kills it. masterclass, man. Such a good performance, such a strong performance, and an amazing thing for her career to be able to be a part of this movie, this now kind of Smile franchise, and really just be the center of it. You're this pop star, you're this larger than life icon, but you're dealing with this crazy trauma and the lengths that she has to go to in this film. It's just, it's downright crazy, man. It also amps up the gore, it amps up the scares, everything's dialed up the way that it should be for a sequel. Now, the third act and the way that things resolve, I've seen a little bit of back and forth about that, just between critics and audiences, just like what people thought about that. Personally, I enjoyed it. I don't know yet if it's as rewatchable as the first, but I guess I'm going to see because I'm going to buy it, and I'm definitely going to rewatch it and see if I want to continue to revisit it. But regardless, I highly suggest checking out Smile 2. If you haven't seen the first Smile, watch that, then watch this one and enjoy yourself. But moving on to number 4. And dude, there are movies that I enjoyed more than this one, I guess. There's 3 above it. But this is that movie, man. This is that movie of the year that was like, dang, what a freaking good horror movie. This is directed by Arkasha Stevenson, and it's called The First Omen. And this is a prequel to The Omen. You know, you don't really have to know much about that going into it. There are some nods and things like that, but gosh, this film was so scary, but also so beautiful. I shouted out Zoe Kravitz, and I do want to shout out Arkasha Stevenson. This was her directorial debut as well. And this movie's just an absolute banger. It's a very pretty thing to look at, but when it gets rolling, it's a very scary and horrifying thing to look at. And this film also does kind of wrap back around, and it does a great job at setting itself up for more. Obviously, this is a prequel to The Omen. There have been other iterations of The Omen, but personally, I would love to see a remake with Arkasha Stevenson attached and just like keep this ball rolling because it's so good. I've seen so much praise about it online this entire year. People are just loving it, and that makes me happy, but definitely watch it if you haven't. The First Omen. But moving on to number 3, and if you watch my top 10 video, you'll kind of know where I'm heading with these. If you've been watching my channel at all for this year, you'll know like the horror movies that I've just been absolutely raving about.
Have you ever dreamt of a better version of yourself?
The Substance. My number 3 is The Substance. Funny enough, I'm part of the Austin Film Critics Association out here in Austin, and we just had our nominees come out. And Coralie Fargiat, the director, as well as just The Substance in general, is nominated for a bunch, and that makes me so excited. It's also getting a lot of awards buzz, potentially with like the Oscars. Coralie might be up for Best Director. Demi Moore might be up for Best Actress. Margaret Qualley might be up for Best Supporting. And seeing horror have just an identity like that, like seeing horror take a stage like that, it was a huge deal with Everything Everywhere for independent films, but seeing horror really get up there again and make its place back in the award season is just fucking awesome. Like, it makes me so happy because there have been years, and I'll talk about The Substance, but there have been years like Mia Goth in Pearl, like her performance was so great, and then you just see like nothing about it, nothing in award season, and it always pisses me off a little bit because I'm like, man, I watched a lot of these movies this year, and that was better than that. You know what I mean? Like, not to sound like a pretentious douchebag, but like, I don't know. I feel like I can at least call it when I see it, and Mia Goth's performance in Pearl, like the ending monologue, blew me away. There were moments in The Substance where I felt the same way. After watching this movie, I couldn't help but give it 5 out of 5 stars because I was emotionally floored by what the fuck just happened to me. It's this crazy burst of energy. There's so many amazing images that you're constantly seeing, but then it just heads in this trajectory of just all-out chaos, and the ball just keeps rolling and rolling and rolling until the end where everything blows up. And it's an amazing feat by the director and just such a fun and proud moment for Demi Moore as an actress. Like, having this film be this big staple in her career after all of these years and coming back, it's so cool. It's such a fun premise, and if you have not seen The Substance, watch that movie now. With that being said, I'm moving on to the top 2. I don't know why I always feel like I have to do that. Moving on to the top 2, my number 2 is a film that just has a special place in my heart. I've talked about it an awful lot here on the channel, but my wife and I absolutely love this film. We dressed up as the characters for Halloween. This film is Longlegs. Because you are the dark. Longlegs is a movie that takes Micah Monroe, It Follows, already a horror icon. You put her in this film and you put her across from Nicolas Cage and you just see what happens. And it's beautiful. The character of Longlegs that Osgood and Nicolas Cage created is one of the most aesthetically kind of uncomfortable to look at characters that you'll ever see. He's such a weird looking thing, and that's the cool thing about it. It's Longlegs. It's like this creature, and that's what's so Silence of the Lambs about it. There's this essence of the film that's like trying to uncover this thing, but then you bridge into the territory of this thing actually being hilarious as well. Like, we are constantly laughing while watching this movie because I feel like it's bordering on this tone, and I think that's when you bridge into the territory, for me at least, of cult classic. I've already watched this film more times than some other horror movies that I saw once in theaters and I absolutely loved, but this film is already just there for me. I love the tone of it, I love the vibe of it, I love the way that it's shot, I love Micah Monroe in it, and then just the acts that they have, the way that this thing is split up, the structure of it. First two acts, really solid. Silence of the Lambs type thing. And then the third act kind of throws everything for a curveball, and you either love it or you hate it. I've seen some people hate it, and I've seen a lot of people love it. But Longlegs is just one that's always going to live with me, and Nicolas Cage, just those songs that he sings, "Let me in now, and it will be nice." It's like, what the hell are you doing, dude? Like, what am I watching? So definitely go watch that one if you haven't seen it. And on to my number one. This is a film that I just watched for the second time on Christmas Day. I took my wife, and luckily she absolutely loved it. You're always like worried a little bit. Me being a critic, I typically see movies a little bit before the audiences do, just to kind of get my review out and think about some things. And so I watched this movie, and the anticipation kind of built as I waited to show this to my wife, and I'm so happy that she enjoyed it. But my number one is Nosferatu.
We are here encountering the vampire. Nosferatu.
And this was honestly second on my list for top 10 films of the year. So this film really made it up there. I didn't expect to be as floored as I was. I am a huge fan of Robert Eggers and most of the things that he's done. Northman, I wasn't the biggest fan of, but I still enjoyed it. But The Witch is like phenomenal. I've always loved the hell out of that movie, and The Lighthouse is certainly an experience, and I personally liked it, but I've seen so much criticism of that film already. I've engaged in so much talk about that. But Nosferatu is a hell of an undertaking. This is a very famous story, a story that very much flows with the story of Dracula. I think Bram Stoker, the author of Dracula, I think that came before, and then Nosferatu came through, and I think there was a right situation. You can correct me down in the comments if I'm wrong on that, but Nosferatu and Dracula are very similar. If you've seen Francis Ford Coppola's Dracula movie, and then you watch Nosferatu, you see a lot of similarities there. And so I kind of knew the story going into this. There's a lot to live up to, but the way that Robert Eggers paid homage to everything that had come before, but he also poured so much heart and love into his vision. And I think that's what people wanted to see. People wanted to know what Robert Eggers' Nosferatu looks like. And holy shit, it looks amazing. Just the imagination and vision to come up with some of these shots is spectacular. And it shows you why some of these artists are at the top of their game and are the ones making the movies for us to see. This guy is just an absolute genius. And then you get to the performances. You have Lily Rose Depp, you have Nicholas Hoult, you have Willem Dafoe. It's a stacked cast, and yes, this movie is long, and the criticism that I've seen people make, I feel like it's getting confused, because I've seen people say that this movie is boring, and I can't help but argue back on that, because I do not think there's a moment in this film that's actually boring. I think that this is just a longer movie, and you have to know that and be aware of that going into it. Modern audiences, they love short bursts of energy, and this is a film that you have to see through, and by the end of it, it is a beautiful, 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 I think the way that I described it in my review is an epic masterpiece. And I know that sounds crazy, but go see this movie and tell me it's not. Nosferatu is one of the coolest stories that it's out there, and vampires are back on the scene in a time that we came up with Twilight, and vampires kind of started to take this turn into a territory where it's like, I guess guess they're not so scary after all. When you see Bill Skarsgård's Count Orlok in this film, I don't think Bella's gonna want to hook up with him anymore. It's just a really rad movie. It's a really fun time in the theaters, and it's in theaters right now. So go watch it. Go support Robert Eggers. Go support this vision so that we can keep getting movies like this, because Nosferatu is the epitome of what going to the theater should look like. It's the epitome of that feeling that you should get as an audience member, just being blown away. Highly recommended. I highly recommend all of these movies, guys. It was a phenomenal year for horror. I think any horror fans out there can agree with me. It was awesome. 2023 was great too, and I think 2025 is going to be just as good. There are some really good films on the docket for next year, and so keep an eye on my channel. I'm going to be reviewing all of them. I'm a big horror guy, and as for this year, I guess it's time to close the book. But let me know all of your thoughts down in the comments. Let me know your list. What's your top 10 list of horror films of 2024? As always, make sure you hit the like button, hit subscribe if you're new here, and keep up the good vibes, my friends. I'll see you next year, because we're so close, because it's almost 2025.